So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our regularly scheduled Thursday afternoon webinar. Welcome to Innovative Business Advisors. And as many of you who are regulars know, I'm going to start out with just a little bit of logistics, and then we'll jump right into the webinar. We're using Zoom portal today, and as a reminder, we will take questions throughout the webinar. So plan to type your questions into the Q&A dialogue as soon as that question pops into your head, and we'll do our best to answer all questions during the webinar today. If by chance we don't manage to answer all of the questions, we will have information available for you after the webinar. And that information includes a recording of the webinar along with a transcript of the Q&A. And to the degree that we use any slides or PowerPoint presentations here, we'll make those available too within our Google Docs page, which we'll send you links to. So with that said, today on our webinar, the panel includes Steve Denny and Terry Lammers, who are principals of Innovative Business Advisors. Our guest today is Jay Zweibaum, who is principal of Two Tree Consulting. Very interesting topic today. Steve's going to kick us off with a little bit of background on where we stand relative to the CARES Act and any updates, and then we'll jump into a conversation with Jay. So Steve, the microphone is yours now.
Marquita, thank you very much. And as always, thank you so much for giving us your Thursday afternoons to moderate these panels. We're very appreciative of all that you do. And Marquita, everybody should know, is running for the board of directors of the International Business Brokerage Association. And we're strongly supporting her candidacy. She's been a committee member for many years, has been a very strong producer within the industry. And I just think the industry as a whole would really benefit from her leadership on the board. So Marquita, we're pulling for you, we're praying for you, and we hope that you're elected as a board member to serve our international association.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for that endorsement.
Listen, folks, it's interesting times. Terry and I never thought we'd be talking about CARES Act, 6 months after the original rollout. And there really isn't any real news to talk about, with the exception that I think there is a little bit of a bright spot on the horizon. So for those of you that pay any attention to the evening news or get your news in any other fashion, you know that the Democrats on Capitol Hill have been holding out for a $3.5 trillion additional aid package, which basically sprinkles money on everybody in the world. And the Republicans have been on the other side of the fence trying to get an aid package done that's somewhat less than $1 trillion. And now the Trump administration, they had staked out a position of approximately $1.5 trillion. But earlier this week, on Tuesday of this week, actually, the president came out and is now pushing the Republicans to increase their level a little bit. He's demonstrating some flexibility on his side and asking the Democrats to see if they can find some common ground. So clearly the business community is hurting, particularly the small business community, and most specifically the hospitality communities. And this additional aid can't come soon enough. So hopefully our elected officials will put aside their partisanship, sit down at the table, and see if they can find some common ground. We're still hearing from a lot of banks that if you have PPP loans of $150,000 or less, that it is prudent to put off filing for forgiveness yet, even though you may have already used the money. And that is due to the fact that the National Bankers Association and all of the major trade industries associated with banks and lending are strongly supporting a blanket forgiveness of PPP loans that were $150,000 or less. And part of that is selfish interest on their part. The application for PPP loans was very easy to do and very easy to process. The application for forgiveness is much more complicated and much more detailed, and banks recognize that if they've got to process 15 million small business applications for forgiveness, it's basically going to monopolize the banking industry for a period of time. And that doesn't seem to be, what the CARES Act was intended to do. So if there's ever a time to reach out to your congressperson and let them know your position, I would say now is a great time to do that. So that's basically it from an aid perspective. I want to transition over to introduce you all to Two Trees Consulting, an international consulting firm, and Mr. Jay Zweibaum, who's the founder and principal of that firm. Jay and I go way back. He's a hospitality giant. People rely on him and his advice, as I said, worldwide. And, for the last couple of weeks, we've focused on hospitality. It's the industry segment that's really struggling and really hurting by and large. Last week, we were fortunate enough to have Scott Swindler come on and talk about one of the real industry bright spots, and that is what Chick-fil-A is doing to basically survive, pivot their business model. And that, boy, have they made a huge pivot, and now they're really thriving, generating, higher revenues, record revenues. And so we've asked Jay if he would come on and invest a little bit of his time to share with our audience and give us a little bit of insight into some things that can help others within the industry survive, pivot, and thrive. And Jay has graciously agreed to do that. So we are honored and blessed to introduce you to Mr. Jay Zweibaum. So Jay, thank you very much for making the time.
Steve, Marquito, Terry, thanks so much for having me on. It's a real honor to be here with you guys. You're doing great work.
Well, thanks for that. You are as well. I know you're doing a huge amount of work in the senior care community in particular, and that's got really unique challenges as well. And I know you've got a short presentation to give us, and we just want to give you the floor. And I've got several questions and several things I'd like to engage with you as you go. So at this point, Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Steve, let me just give everyone a little bit of background on me. So I worked for a really large food service company with you at one point, and for 27 years. I spent about 16 of those working in the New York City area, managing and leading teams at companies like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Travelers, Siemens, and others. After about 16 years, I was asked to move to the UK to take over about half of the business there. And that amounts to like $110 million at the time, whatever the exchange rate was. And after about a year, they reorganized and they said, Jay, you're really good. And this was kind of a curse for me as I was in New York, was I'm really good at turnarounds. I'm really good at looking at opportunities, reducing costs, making accounts profitable, and building a good team. And in some ways that was great. In other ways it was a curse because they didn't want me to go and do something else. But they asked me to go to the UK. I ran that business for about a year, and then they said, hey, can you take over the operational excellence role? Operational excellence is really about standardizing and managing both food and labor in the accounts and building, a platform and a process to roll those things out. And so I did that. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I know you don't like to talk about this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point this out. Jay Zweibaum is truly he's an American hero. He's one of the unsung heroes. So Jay was literally located across the street from the World Trade Centers when the World Trade Centers came down. And Jay mobilized a team and was part of that relief effort for what, Jay, more than a year?
Yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, and he is truly an American hero, and selfishly gave of himself and all of his skills to lead a group that ministered to thousands of relief workers and thousands of displaced folks in Lower Manhattan for a long period of time. So again, Jay, I was thinking about you and praying about you a week ago as we celebrated that anniversary. You and I will never forget where we were in that period of time and going through that, and you were on the front lines of it from minute one. So I just want to point that out. It's very rare that you get to cross paths with a true American hero, and I would say that in American history, Jay will always go down as that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Steve. I think you're being overly generous, but I think just to because it is so fresh from last week being the anniversary. You know, a couple of things that strike me about that time. It's all about my people. I actually had one employee who was taking vending inventory in the South Tower in the basement. And when the plane hit, the shock wave and flames from that plane shot down the elevator shaft. It blew the doors open in the basement. And my employee, who was from Honduras and played classical guitar, like that was his passion, he was burnt along all areas that were exposed. So that included his hands and his neck and parts of his face. He survived though, which is amazing. You don't hear about a lot of people who survived 9/11. They were either safe or they died. And he somehow escaped that basement and got medical help, but he could never play, you know, I haven't talked about this in a long time. He'll never play, you know, classical guitar again. The other thing that's kind of ironic to me, I ran the Solomon Smith Barney at 7 World Trade. If you guys remember, that was that dark brown building that around 4:55 p.m. collapsed. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories about it. There was flames on the roof and it burnt the building. But my team, before they evacuated that building, because it wasn't hit, they were like wrapping up all the food. Right, so they were taking the food off the line, they were wrapping it carefully, putting it away, locked the money in the safe, which they did find, but there was nothing inside it because of the heat. But just think about like the care that they took to take care of the company's assets and the client's assets and each other, yet it was a ridiculous notion in reflection.
Unbelievable chaos. Unbelievable chaos.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I mean, it was a challenging time. I worked 6 blocks away up Greenwich Street from that fire that is the longest burning fire in world history. And, you know, the smoke that came out of that, and even I don't have any lasting effects, but, you know, constant runny nose, itchy eyes, coughing for months from that thing. So, yeah, I was glad it's over.
Jay, I was a volunteer fireman for 22 years, and you know, obviously nobody will forget that day, but it was amazing. Just as a firefighter, you went from just a kind of a ho-hum thing to instant hero, and obviously I wasn't there, but what a day.
Yeah,
hard to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, let's go back to UK, if that's okay, Steve. So they asked me to take over this OpEx role. I actually had the great opportunity to take over a small project, which was to standardize recipes in a way that people could use them across all the locations. And I said, you know what, let's build the food management process in, right? So if we already have the recipes and the pricing, everything else is kind of easy because that's the core data. I remember we got a pilot up and running on December 7th or 6th of 2007. In January, I presented to the regional European team. Everybody put their hand up and said, we need that, except for Germany, who already had something, of course. And I then, you know, proceeded to translate into 8 languages and 7 countries this tool that I called OpEx Central, which confused people with Grand Central, but it sounded like a good name at the time. So I ended up rolling it out in Belgium, Spain, Ireland, Mexico, Korea, and China. And when my time was up, kind of my 3-year stint, I continued to stay in international, moved back to the US, based at home in our central office. And, you know, what was so cool about that, when I look back on that experience, the thing I remember obviously is the people, because when you go into a country and you're trying to influence them without formal authority, which a lot of us have to do when you're in functional roles, you have to build those relationships. So you know, I remember going up to mines at 17,000 feet and trying to sleep 2 days up there. But what I remember more is those relationships that I built in the dinners that I had where we never talked about work, but we built a trust and respect for each other. So that when the organization said, hey, Jay, you got to get these guys to do it, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, Steve, I know you don't want to do this, but we got to get this done together. Let's talk about it. And inevitably, it always happened, right? We always managed to get it done when we needed to. And I think that relationship piece was so, so important. The other thing that I learned from that, when you don't speak the language, and I do speak Spanish, I have conducted meetings or been in meetings for a full day, which is really hard to focus on in Spanish. But when you don't speak Korean or Chinese or other languages, but you have to operate, what are you going to do? You're going to watch body language, facial expressions, things like that. So I like to think that I've become really good at watching people and looking for clues about buy-in, acceptance, or other things that are going to be important as you move forward with those folks. So that was an amazing experience for me. In 2017, I left and I joined Holiday Retirement, which is the nation's largest independent living company. At the time, over 300 communities across 40 something states. And my role was VP of Dining. I did that for about a year. I'll say hands up, I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in senior living. I knew I could do the job, right? Food service and senior living is pretty simple. I didn't know if I wanted to work with a bunch of old people. That was what I thought in my head. I'm like, I can do the job. I don't know if I want to work with old people. But I will tell you, after 3 months, my favorite part of the job was working with our elders, with our seniors. Each one of them, I came to realize, you know, is a living library of experiences and memories. And you can't capture that in any way. But to have the chance to go around the country, and I went all sorts of states I've never been to, and to sit down with them when they thought I didn't want to talk to them because they had nothing but complaints about dining. I never got up until I had a win. I remember this one guy, and anybody in food service will appreciate this. Anything we did didn't work. How do you like the water? No, it stinks. Try our new menu. Here's 5 new items. Nah, I don't like any of it. This stuff is crap. And we tried everything. At the very end, you know what it was that he really wanted? Pickled beets, Terry. He wanted pickled beets. So what did I do? I went into the back. I got on the phone with our purveyor, and I said, listen, I need a case of pickled beets. And we took that bottle of pickled beets, and I stuck it on his table, because if you don't know this, senior, it's a little bit like middle school. They all sit at the same table every day.
They all have their own place.
Don't ever take their seat. So even that, you know, like everything was terrible. He just wanted pickled beets. And it makes you feel for the experiences of our seniors who move into assisted living, especially, not necessarily independent living, where they have no control over what's happening, right? They have an apartment, but you know, they've given up a lot of control in their lives, and dining and food is something that they can still stake a claim to. And you know, it's their home, not mine. So I always like to try to help them out.
Jay, Marquita and Steve were both laughing because I am not a fan of pickles. He said pickled beets. I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me.
I saw your head hit the table.
Sorry.
You know, Japan, China, and Korea live on fermented foods, and fermented foods they've found
staple of their diet.
Helps fight COVID. So you might want to reconsider your dislike for. It doesn't have to be pickled, just fermented food. So miso, sauerkraut, kimchi.
Yeah.
Kimchi's a great one.
So Jay, you gotta understand that Terry lives in the heart of the greatest sauerkraut district in the face of the earth, right? Where he lives is famous for that.
I'm 100% German, and I didn't get that gene. So pickles and sauerkraut, no. I can tell you stories of sitting at the dinner table as a kid, waiting for my dad to take the trash out so I could scrape my plate off.
So I did that for a while, and then I decided that I would take all this experience and knowledge that I thought was pretty interesting and try to go out on my own and share that in a way that allowed me some flexibility and really to have an impact on. And I really enjoy small businesses. Until recently with COVID, I mean, I worked with a wealth management company. I worked with a staffing company. I work with an adult daycare. I currently work with a couple of senior living companies. So I feel like my experience in the process, and I'll share the process shortly, that I use is applicable to all businesses. And my expertise is dining. My passion is hospitality. I even spent about 8 months in an accounting firm, and I will confess, Marquita, that is not the life for Jay. The profile of someone who wants to be an accountant is just kind of the antithesis of somebody who goes into hospitality. And I think they found me very odd because I was bubbly and interested in them and wanted to check on them. And they were always like, what do you want? I'm fine. It's a great experience. I'm a hospitality guy. I know that, true and true. So that's kind of, and that brings us to today.
Yeah, and Jay's a world-class hospitality guy. So Jay's the one that taught me that, you know, food is food, right? It's all about the hospitality and experience around the food that really makes it different and better. And I think you can see from Jay's introduction that Jay focuses on the whole experience. And I think that's his superpower. That's what makes him unique and what makes his services so in demand. So Jay, I know you've got some stuff to share with us, and I'll try and be quiet and listen.
Just a few slides for context, and hopefully I can do this properly. I'm going to share my screen. So it's this one, and then that is not for you, and that's me. So Tucci Consulting, Steve was like, what the heck is that, Jay? Why is there a giant squirrel on the screen? So I just thought I would share a little story with you. In addition to my passion for food, or as part of that, I love gardening. So I start my seeds in February. In fact, I even took a red bell pepper that I bought, you know, those Holland peppers, and I took the seeds out and I germinated them. So 0 expense because I'm frugal. But anyway, I have like 30 tomato plants and peppers, and I'm a chili head. So I have jalapenos, and I did a Persian pepper called a Hoscaria. Never did that before. Anyway, I did all these plants. And in July, I had these beautiful tomatoes. They were like gorgeous, the best I've ever had. We had actually expanded our garden. And then something odd happened. Never in my life, and I have neighbors as well who lived here their entire life, have I seen squirrels go and eat green tomatoes. I don't know if this happened in Missouri, but it happened here, and it happened in New Jersey. And we think that it's because of a lack of rain, and the squirrels were thirsty, and they could get good moisture out of the tomatoes. So I had probably 100 tomatoes, beautiful, different heirloom varieties on my plants. I tried everything, double fencing, water. I brought my friend's dog over and said, pee on the yard, like anything you could think of to stop the squirrels from eating my tomatoes. And you know, I didn't succeed. there's a video online of this like NASA scientist who set up this whole squirrel maze with the nuts. I don't know if Steve, you're shaking your head. Maybe you saw that.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Squirrels are super, super, super smart. And it was for like a few days, I was absolutely beside myself. And why? And it's relevant to COVID.
You know what you needed, Jay, right? Do you know in hindsight what you needed?
A dog.
A fox.
We have those. But
Natural
squirrels,
predator.
you know, squirrels sleep at night. So they're only out during the day.
Yeah.
So the
Did you say a fox?
Yeah.
Yeah, inside my garden. So, I mean, my next door neighbor or my neighbor, their entire garden, I had them like tied up pretty well. It was not just, they ripped down the tomatoes and they ripped the tomato plants. So they like shredded the whole thing. It's like I called it the squirrel tomato zombie apocalypse because I had never seen it before. So why would I even tell you guys this story? You're like, I logged in here to get some business advice. Well, I'm sharing this because we all are passionate about something and we work hard for it. And you're about to get the fruits of your labor, or you're in the process of reaping the fruits of your labor. Say it's a restaurant or a small business, and it's just ripped from you. And that's what COVID's done to a lot of us, right? My business basically disappeared overnight. And I felt the same way. It was like PTSD with the squirrels eating my tomatoes. It's something I could do. I was passionate about. It gave me joy, and the squirrels wouldn't even let me do that. So I just wanted to share it because I think it's a great analogy about what a lot of us are going through. You guys are familiar with roller coasters? I don't like roller coasters, but this last 6 months has been a roller coaster, right? For all of us. And when you think about that, where are you on the roller coaster today? This is actually a change curve, if you guys are familiar with change. I don't know, are you the guy, Steve, hanging there at the bottom by your fingertips? Or maybe, you know, as you guys talk about, is it, you know, you're surviving, or have you pivoted? Are you at the hope and readjustment phase? Are you looking towards the future, or are you thriving already? You know, the last week's session was so great to hear some really positive stories around how people have learned, pivoted, and thrived in this environment. And not everybody has. Senior living has been hurt, and we've lost a lot of our residents due to death and COVID, or families taking them out. They want to be at home. But, you know, it goes on, and they're doing well for the most part. So my question to you guys is, you know, where are you? Are you surviving? I just made up a word. Are you surviving? Are you pivoting? Are you thriving in this environment? I think it's a long road. I could tell you that the thing for me that was really helpful, the fact that I couldn't go to my client locations, and I said I have a staffing agency as a client. They were having a phenomenal year. I've worked with them for a number of years. They were growing at 22% after growing 18% last year. They were investing. We were looking at moving locations. And to this day, from kind of mid-March till now, they have zero business because restaurants are really hurt. The events business, conferences, banking, nothing's going on, right? Everything's virtual. So people who work in that space, just like the theaters, you know, there's zero for them to do. And that's hard, right? They're just trying to survive. But anyway, it gave me the opportunity to actually focus in some different areas. It allowed me to invest in some new businesses, a new startup, actually located in the Kansas City area, on food service training. It allowed me to focus on helping my partner who does senior living menus work on their IT development. It helped me focus on a new business. I actually got new business in March with a senior living company who was switching from one super supplier to another, needed a menu system and needed somebody to help coordinate that. I continue to work with them today in all different aspects. So you never know where a phone call, an email is going to take you. And it's really exciting if you think about it that way. I mean, we all have to get up every day and will ourselves to be positive sometimes. If you turn on the news, you're going to be dead. So I try to will myself to be positive and help others be positive. So I'll just pause for a second, take a drink. So depending on where you are in your survive, pivot, and thrive journey, you know, what things are you doing today? I'm going to talk a little bit about a process that I use, but the first thing you probably looked at, and I certainly looked at, you know, what cost can I get rid of? How am I going to evaluate what's important and what isn't? I did 2 Zoom calls with a potential client. I was presenting 37 people on. I have a 4-year-old Mac, like Mac Air, and it froze both times. So do I have another $1,000 to go and buy another computer? Well, it's a reputational, you know, my wife said, Jay, it's a reputational issue. You cannot have Zoom calls freeze on you when you're trying to build business. So what did I do? I went out and bought it. Like, so it's targeting what expenses make sense and what don't. You know, do you need a new car today? Do you need to buy the prime rib, or maybe you're going to go with top round? I don't know. And then how do you measure that impact? Like, these are the things that I'm always thinking about. Do I want to pay for GoToMeeting, or do I want to use a free tool? And I always talk to my clients about this as well, because it's super important. When you look at changing a business, you have to first evaluate where you are today. What things are happening in your business? What does your labor look like? What are your other expenses? Did you know workman's comp is a really expensive thing, but also something that you can reduce? How is your insurance covering you? Like, here's a personal one, right? Have you called your insurance company, Steve, to say, you know what, I was driving 40,000 miles a year, which I know you're not because you're committed to not traveling, but people travel in their car and now they're not. And did you know if you call the insurance company, you could get a lower rate because you're not doing as many miles? Like, it's just like little things like that they all add up. Somebody once told me, and I quote all the time, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. So sometimes it seems insignificant, but if you overlook every insignificant cost savings, you now overlook the really big savings. So those are the things that I did, you know, from day one. I did a budget. I looked at the expenses that I had. I projected out what I thought my revenue would be for the next 6 months. And by the way, I do that every week. I look at my projected revenue and I look at the expenses that I have, because it is tiring to do that, by the way, right? When you have to count your pennies every day, and your businesses and your customers, they're all doing that. Do I really need to have a lawn guy? Well, if I don't, then I have to buy a lawnmower, and do I want to spend whatever to get a lawnmower? So everything, you know, has an assessment and a weight to it. And then once you've done that and you're ready to pivot, I love this saying, like, you know, how many bets can you have on the table at one time, right? Depending on the size of your business, the income that you have coming in, you know, you can have one. I think everybody can have one bet. Can you have two? And then with that bet, what are you gonna do with it? What does the future look like for you and your business? And where are the opportunities? So when you think about like that, so you've reduced your costs, you kind of know where you're going, you have a revenue stream that is at least somewhat predictable, or you think it is. And then you're like, all right, well, how can I change in this environment? So if you think about a restaurant, because I watch it all the time here, and I live in New York. We're at 50% indoor capacity, outdoor dining. We've been, I think, 10 weeks with a transmission rate below 1%. We're very stable. There's 460 people in the state in the hospital. So we're doing pretty well. So now I can open my restaurant. I can do outdoor dining. I could only do delivery before. Where do I want to place my bet? Do I want to invest in indoor dining? If it was me and I was doing the math, I think buying a tent, it's getting colder, getting warmers, and having outdoor dining as long as possible is my best opportunity, because 50% indoor dining isn't going to do it. You can't, you know, if you were 100% full and you want to do turn tables 3 times or 2.5 times, now you have to do it 5 times to get the same revenue. If you can move it outside, push delivery, then, you know, that investment in the infrastructure for outdoor dining makes a lot of sense to me. So that's what I mean by kind of like, where are you going to place your bet? And if you're lucky, you can get someone to sponsor your tent, Heineken, for instance, because I saw that down the street. Then maybe you don't have to pay anything for it, right? So there's all sorts of opportunities to look at and to you know, pivot towards something that's going to be different but meaningful to you and your business. I'll just pause. Any questions, Steve, at this point?
No, you're right on. That's I keep thinking about Scott last week. You know, the fact that Chick-fil-A is actually considering not reopening their dining room, to me, just floored me. It absolutely floored me, and I've focused on it all week long. But it's exactly right, Jay. You know, when you're paying attention to your expenses on a weekly basis and managing your P&L on a weekly basis, you can actually see the direct effect of every dollar that you spend. And I think what you're giving is very wise advice. You can afford to place one bet, and you can afford to see very quickly, is that bet paying off for you? And thus, if you're spending $1 and you're not seeing the direct result of that, you can immediately pull that bet off the table and potentially make another bet. Try it a different way. So, you know, people are going to eat. The one thing about food service is we can't go without eating and we can't go without drinking. And people that have been in their homes for, you know, the last 6 months, they're looking for an experience. So if you've got a great product and you can deliver it to people's homes and you can figure out a way to deliver at least a portion of the experience, you are going to set yourself apart in the hospitality market. And I think, you know, I think our friends at Chick-fil-A have conclusively proven that people will support you. They will change their habits, and they will change the standard operating procedure to support your efforts. But the hospitality vendor is the one that's got to lead with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on with that example. And you said something that I'm going to say, and I truly believe that there is so much pent up demand for experiences and for being taken care of by somebody. I'm actually this weekend, because, you know, you start to feel trapped, and you know, 3 meals a day cooked at home and working in the office, and I go for walks every day, and I've never seen so many people walking in my life, because there's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. So I'm actually going to take a 2-hour drive out to Connecticut and go to a clam shack and go to the beach.
It's the silver lining, Jay. I've met more of my neighbors in the last 6 months than I've met in the last 15 years of living in that house, just because everybody's outside walking regularly.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking about this Thrive thing a lot. And so I put some stuff on here. One thing that you might have picked up from me is that I really care about people. And I think taking care of your team is probably the #1 thing you can do. And that doesn't mean you're not going to make good business decisions about the number of people that you have on your team or what those roles are, or you may ask more of them. But I believe to have a fully engaged workforce, you need 3 things. The first one is people need to know what's expected of them. So when things are going really well, sometimes we don't do a good job of telling people what we want them to do, right? The next thing is they need the tools to do their job. I talked about my computer earlier. If you're a chef, you know, you need a chef hat, you need a good knife, you need a name tag, you need safety shoes, maybe you need a computer. And then the final thing is that you need to make sure that people feel valued and appreciated for doing it, right? That's how if you can do those three things, you have a really strong chance of having an engaged workforce, because people are going to come to work knowing what they're supposed to do. They're going to have the tools to do it, and they're going to feel valued and appreciated for doing those things. Once you have that, you can build and develop those teams into all sorts of things. So I would just encourage everybody to make sure you're taking care of your team. One of the things, especially during COVID, is, you know, there's so many things we can't control right now. Earthquakes, fires, hurricanes, COVID, social unrest, whatever you want to add to that. I'm sure there's more in your area. We can't control those things. So focus on the things you can control in your business, in your life. I just think there's so much other stuff out there that can easily distract you. Like I don't watch TV anymore. I don't really read the news. I check the New York Times for 5 minutes a day, and that's it. Steve, you said this earlier, actually, right? So be ready to let go of the things that aren't working. So it may be legacy stuff that you did before this situation occurred, and now it worked really well then, but it doesn't work now. Or maybe you're trying something new. You know, give yourself a timeline to say, it's been 2 months. I'm not getting any result. I need to let go and move on to something else. Because every day and every week that goes on, you're losing that opportunity for something that's going to be better. Build partnerships and diversify your revenue streams. I talked earlier about how I'm now working with a menu system. I have direct day-to-day consulting. I have online training. I have importer that I work with. I work with GPOs. All of those things either are or will be, in my humble opinion, different revenue streams. So I love the day-to-day consulting. I like to be able to call Steve up and say, all right, Steve, we're working on IBA today. We're reorganizing your team. We're looking to add on new positions. Let's go. Let's go. I'm ready. But at the same time, it's very comforting to know that I have commissions coming in, or I have shared revenue, or I have other things like that that are potential. It builds that base and diversifies your revenue stream so that you have confidence about the future. If I'm only going to do in-person consulting, I'm really not going to do very well right now. Nobody wants to see me. Right. So if I didn't have the tools, could you imagine if it was the 80s and this was happening? What would we do if there was no Zoom? Marquita, what would we
no
do
internet.
with Zoom? Oh my God. So I think building those partnerships are so important, and you will not necessarily see a payday on that, right? I'll help anybody. I'll have a conversation with anybody about anything, because I think kindness and help and support will always pay off at some point. Always. And Steve, you talked about, you know, just your neighborhood. Like, what are you doing in your local community? Our little local community, I live in a small town, and they did a gift card. I don't know if this happened other places. They did a gift card drive. So people went around and bought $50 or $100 gift cards from every store and restaurant in our town. And then everybody who did that got to, at the end of it, pick out however many they bought. And it was for the barber, it was for the restaurants, it was for the delis, it was for the bookstore. We have a little local bookstore, a coffee shop. And they raised something like $50,000 or $60,000. Which is amazing, because they weren't going to go use those, right? I imagine every single person still holding on to those gift cards until this whole thing is over. So Build those relationships, build those processes, partnerships, and then improve the way you do things. Make sure you actually have a process. I think I talked about enabling technology, deploying that without having a process behind it. Happens all the time that companies say, you know what, if we get HubSpot and we pay $49 a person, our sales growth is going to be exponential. And then we all go to Steve and we say, Steve, we just spent $49 for 300 people and our sales haven't changed at all, and everyone's sitting there putting data into a computer. Well, there probably wasn't a process behind what we bought HubSpot for in the first place. So it's really important. I'm not picking on HubSpot, anybody out there. It's just a name in my head. It's more about thinking that technology is going to solve a problem when really you need to have a process for that. So some other things to consider as you look to thrive in this new environment. Leverage technology. So I said I'm working with an online learning tool. So I've been in hospitality for more than 30 years. I have never seen this in my life. What I'm working with is a company that has developed training that's 3 to 5 minutes. It's called Pineapple Academy. It's 3 to 5 minutes because MIT and Harvard say that adults stop learning after 6 minutes. They can't focus that long. So you guys have been listening to me for a lot longer, so sorry about that. Hopefully you're still here. So what it is though, it's online food service focused right now on senior living. It's going to expand. So it's hand washing, it's sinks, it's 20 different types of ways to cut different vegetables. It's how to make basic sauces. It's so basic. It's not like the Lobster Inc., which is like a master's program. This is like community tech. And it has knowledge checks and it has in-person proctors. Anyway, the point is that you can't necessarily rely on the same way of doing things that you used to do, because if you're in senior living, you can't go visit those communities. How do you know what's happening? You may not want to go into every restaurant if you're a district or regional leader or any business. So how do you check on the key metrics that you want to occur if you don't have a system or a process to do it? So leverage technology where it makes sense. If you're in dining and you don't have a GPO, join a GPO because they're going to help reduce your cost and you don't have to do anything different. Focus on engagement with your people. And like I said, community outreach and participation. Be a part of the local Better Business or Elks Club or whatever it is that is important in your area, and just be a part of that community. It's so, so important. So all of this involves like a change of mindset and a change in how you're going to do things. And I want you to think about, Steve, COVID's been on for 26 months, and maybe some of us who haven't been walking have gained some weight, and we want to lose some weight. All right. So if you don't feel like you need to lose weight, but you have a vision because you saw it on Instagram or what a really great looking body you could have, and you have a process, you probably aren't going to do it because you're not that urgent to do it. Or maybe you don't like the way you look, but you don't know what you want to do. And maybe you have a diet that you can do. You're probably going to get anxious, and because you don't really know what result you're going after. And this is probably my favorite one, is you don't like it, you know what you want to look like, you have no idea how to do it, and then you start, and then it's just chaos because you can't make that change. I love this visual. For me, it resonates with me around how you make lasting change. You need to have a level of discomfort around the current state. You need to have a vision of where you want to go, and you need to have a process to get there. So I thought I moved this slide, but I just want to share real quickly. I have a green belt in Lean Six Sigma. Marquita and I were talking about that earlier. So whenever I'm working with a client, I always use what they call the DMAIC process. So the DMAIC process is pretty simple in understanding the details or where you get caught, but the first thing is to define the problem. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What are we trying to improve? And then where are we today? We need to measure what our current state is, what our processes are or aren't. And then what do we need to do differently? We're then going to analyze that and come up with the solutions that are going to work. We usually test those solutions. And then we go to the implementation phase, the improve phase. And then most importantly, you have to have control. So if you're a consultant and you go out and you have these lofty ideas, and you know this, if you were in a company that you've had consultants, you've heard this after they leave, right? They make these great big savings and they put it on the slides and leadership buys in and then they leave and everything sucks, right? It all falls over. So you have to have control. You have to have key metrics to measure the outcomes that you want. You have to put that into the hands of the operators so that they know what they're looking for. This process works. It was originally designed, it's called Kaizen, it's devised in Japan, and Six Sigma is 0.0000, did I get that right, Marquita? 1 defects per million. So it was originally a manufacturing thing, and then they added lean, which is more around the service industry. So I just wanted to share this because I don't want people to walk away and feel like I can go do anything without a process. You have to think about what the problem you're trying to solve, where you are today, how do you know that? What are you going to change? Go ahead and change it, and then let's make sure we're measuring it. So somehow this was out of order, but thank you. That was it.
So Jay, can I offer one additional thing to consider?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we find very often is that particularly the solopreneurs, the independent business owner, the small companies, right? The thing they have the hardest thing grappling with is just simply asking for help. And you know, we're in a position where people just need to raise their hand and ask for help. And I think it's amazing the things that happen when you do that. And for some reason, that seems to be one of the biggest issues that the smaller companies have. And they're used to doing it on their own for so long. The tools and expertise are out there, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. There are lots of people that are willing to invest time and effort to helping you deal with the problem at hand. And so I would add that to your list, and I think you've got a phenomenal process for basically ensuring result.
Thank you. Yeah, and I always take a very pragmatic approach. I am an operator, so I am frugal. But you know, we talked about decision making earlier and weighing the pros and cons. And if someone comes to you and they say, "Here are the things that I would look at. Here's what I've experienced in the past in terms of results. Here's what I would do for you," and it'll cost you, I don't know, $5,000. But I'm going to save 50, and I don't have time to do it. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I got a quick story. A friend of mine that's in the C12 group with me, and he has got a family business. They're in the furniture business, right? And you would think that the furniture business is a non-essential business, which in essence it is, but he didn't have to close, right? But his business is actually reaching new heights as well. And one of the interesting thing is everybody else in his industry basically pulled back tightly, and he called his advertising agency to explore pulling back on some of his commitments as well. And basically what his advertising agency, and he does a lot of video advertising on the local cable channels, and they said, "Look, if you'll just stay with us, we'll triple and quadruple and quintuple your ad exposure just for honoring your commitment. So he ended up getting, 5 times the exposure, and his business just took off like a rocket. All of a sudden, he's the only guy on TV talking about that. And so people are spending time in their house, and they're looking at their couch, and they're looking at their chair and thinking, geez, maybe now's the time to upgrade. Where do we go? Well, there he is. He's on the TV. He's on the TV constantly. So his business just took off. So I think, again, that's part of your thing, partnerships. Talk to your vendors. What other resources do they have available to you that can help you in these times? And really exploring those partnerships and thinking outside the box.
Yeah, Jay and Steve both kind of building on what you just said. I'll tell you a little story of an experience I've had over the last few days, and that is because we are in the house all the time now and everything is different, we're all about decorating, and we want to do fall decorating. So we went out and we went to some of probably the well-known store names that you would think of around here that have the pumpkins and all of the accoutrements that go with making the house fall ready. There was no inventory. And I found it very, very interesting that I think companies that are going to have their radar very high relative to making product available as we think differently seasonally than we did in the past. I certainly budgeted as I went into the holidays around decorating and the frivolous things that I put around the house. And now we're thinking we're just going to go all out this year, and there was no, there's no inventory. And it's things as simple and mundane as that will, there will be a firm, a company who will figure that out and have inventory, and people like me who want to really build a nest and build a comforting nest as we move into these holidays, will be spending money like crazy to improve their homes, both regular improvements and then just what I call frivolous decorating. So, but
Marquita,
Jay, thank you. So, yeah, go ahead, Steve. Yeah,
it's amazing. You made me think of, we have another hospitality company, restaurant that is in the business, and one of the things that they discovered is, during the high spots of the COVID, the cleaning supplies and a lot of the staples were hard to get. Well, it wasn't hard to get through their vendors. It was easy for them to get it. So they developed an online business through Facebook advertising and so forth of selling staples that they buy from institutional suppliers. So they're going to their Cisco's and McLean's and their regular distributors and getting things that people couldn't find in the grocery stores, and their business did really, really well. And they basically had a takeout business from their back door, if you will, in an area that they never thought to provide. But just staying close to what their customers were looking for and being attentive to the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
It's amazing to me how in the New York area, all of the local distributors, specialty stores, all pivoted to home delivery. It was a little rough in the first couple of weeks, but they got a real rhythm going, and people were not used to, we have Baldor here and WB Mason, and those types of companies are all now delivering to home, and they still are, because the restaurants aren't nearly at the capacity that they used to be at. And then you even see the local restaurants, and I have a local cheese shop. They're pairing with the bakery and the milk company and the charcuterie, and then they're delivering that over to the brand new little brewery opened in our town. And so now they're getting food from all the restaurants and selling, it's amazing, like those partnerships. That's why I mentioned it, because when you start thinking outside the box about what's possible, it's really, really energizing, I think.
Well, Jay and Steve, I'm looking at the clock, and we're 4 o'clock straight up. So I think I'm going to start to wrap us up here. And Jay, just for your information, the way I wrap up is I give everyone a chance to make one last comment. I'm looking at our Q&A box, and we don't have any additional questions. We had a couple questions about your slides. The audience is very impressed with your slides, and several have asked if they will have access. So Steve, if you and Steve work out getting those slides, we'll make those available to everyone. But with that, I don't see Terry here, so we're going to just wrap up among the three of us. So I'm going to give you, Steve, an opportunity to make a comment first, and then Jay, you'll get absolutely the last comment, and we'll shut it down, okay? So Steve, take it away.
Jay, again, thank you so much. We're so in debt. It's such a thoughtful presentation, packed full of phenomenal stuff. I made, you know, half a page of notes here myself, and I want to learn more about Pineapple Academy. So we'll connect a little later and touch base about that. And perhaps we can help share that resource with others in our network as well. But again, we're in your debt. You do incredible work. You're an amazing human being. I'm honored to be associated with you, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time out to be with us today. I think there'll be a lot of people that participated today on this as viewers, and we'll see lots of replays. And I hope that people will take a few minutes and pick up the phone and reach out to you. And, you certainly demonstrated what a real high quality individual you are and how much you're willing to give to the community. So. Great to see you, Jay, face to face, even though it's over the internet like this. But again, so appreciative of your time today.
Haven't aged a day, Steve.
That's true.
Yeah, you look great.
You got a little grayer here, and I got a little grayer here.
So thank you, Marquita and Steve. Of course, it's great to see you and to participate in the IBA weekly seminars. Real honor to be here. One thing I do want to leave everybody with is, if you do go out to eat, if you saw My Blue Heaven, Steve Martin said, it's not tipping I believe in, it's over tipping. Please be generous with your servers and the teams at the restaurants. They really need it and deserve it. So thank you again. It's really been great.
Hear, hear. Okay, well, thanks so much. That was the last word. Bye, everyone. Look for an email tomorrow with links to all of the information I promised you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.